people in?
Let people in.
Great.
I just lost it.
Welcome, welcome.
Welcome, everybody. I think we're just gonna get started. Welcome to PTAlink's Grants and Funding webinar. Before we get started, I have some announcements. We do have interpretation tonight in Mandarin and Spanish, and speakers will be able to comment and ask questions in their own language, assisted by our interpreters. So the interpreters are now going to take a few moments to introduce themselves and explain how to access their services. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Antonia. Hi, everyone. My name is Alma Jurado. I'm here with my co-interpreters, Chivita and Christine and Fran as well. And we also have tonight, I think that's it, right? Christine and Fran. They are the Mandarin interpreters. So this is a multilingual space. And let me tell you a little bit about that. When we are in a multilingual space, we want to make sure that everyone is listening and speaking in the language that they feel the most comfortable in. So I'm gonna give directions now, first in English and then in Spanish, in how you are gonna access the channel of your choice. En un minutito voy a decirles en español cómo tener acceso a la interpretación, pero primero les voy a enseñar a las personas que hablan inglés. So if you are bilingual, congratulations, that's awesome. But if you'd rather to listen and speak in English, I'm going to invite you to locate at the bottom bar of Zoom a little globe icon. When you find it, please click on it and select English, and that's all you need to do. If you're joining tonight from your smartphone or your tablet, at the bottom right, you're going to see three little dots that say more. When you click on them, you will be able to see the globe icon. Please select English, and then at the top right, click on Done. That way you will remain on that channel for the rest of the meeting. When you are participating, please speak slowly, one person at a time. Otherwise, we cannot catch up with the speed. And if you are not participating, please make sure that your mic is on mute so we don't have any background noise. I don't know if you just noticed, but there was a woo. So that can be very confusing for us. All right, I'm going to repeat everything in Spanish now. Muy buenas noches y bienvenidas. Mi nombre es Alma Jurado. Estoy con mis compañeras Chivita, Cristina y Fran. Somos sus intérpretes de español y mandarín. Y esta noche tenemos un espacio multilingüe, lo cual significa que usted tiene el derecho de escuchar y hablar en el idioma que se sienta más a gusto. Así que le voy a invitar que si usted habla español, en la parte de abajo de Zoom encuentre un pequeño mundito y cuando lo haga, hágale clic, seleccione español y es todo lo que tiene que hacer. Si usted está escuchando por su teléfono inteligente o su tableta, así como está ahí en la página, en la parte de abajo a la derecha, hay tres puntitos que dicen más. Cuando les haga clic, va a poder ver el mundito, seleccione español y en la parte de arriba hágale clic a finalizar para que se quede en ese canal. Cuando participe, porque usted puede participar hablando español o, bueno, si estuviera hablando mandarín también, ¿verdad? Y nosotros vamos a interpretar al inglés. Así que cuando participe, hable lentamente una persona a la vez, por favor. Y si no está participando, si va manejando o algo, asegúrese que su micrófono esté cerrado para que no tengamos ruido de fondo. Muchísimas gracias y que disfrute su reunión. Si llega a tener un problema, póngalo en el chat para que le podamos ayudar. Ahora voy a pasar la palabra a mis compañeras en mandarín. I'm passing the word to my peers who are the Mandarin interpreters. Thank you so much.
大家好，我们开始之前有几则的公告。我们今天晚上会有普通话跟西班牙语的翻译，因此呢，在翻译员的协作下，我们各位讲中文或者是西班牙语的参与者都可以在会议中用自己的语言去问问题或者提意见。我叫 Christine， 我是今天晚上的其中一位中文的翻译。另一位翻译员是 Fran， 他会跟我一起做一个中英文的翻译，而Chivi 跟 Alma 则会进行西班牙语的翻译。那请大家记住，我们这个是一个 多语言的空间，希望大家以最舒服的语言去收听和参与。那现在我就会教一下大家怎么样选择收听你的语言。我们在 Zoom 上已经开启了翻译的功能。如果你是用电脑的话，请在你的荧光幕的底部点击地球仪，并选择中文 Mandarin，以收听普通话的翻译。如果你是用手机或者平板电脑加入我们的话，请点击三个点显示更多那边，选择语言翻译，选择中文。最后点击右上角的完成。这样，当有人在讲英文或者西班牙语的时候，你就可以收听到这个普通话的翻译。那么我们希望大家可以先把你的麦克风静音，以便我们收听会议的内容。而且呢，每次只能有一个人说话，以免这个造成混乱。如果你在执行这个开启翻译功能的操作的时候遇到任何的问题呢，可以在聊天框那边跟我们说，我们会尽力为您提供支援。谢谢，我们这个口译公告到此结束。
Thank you so much, interpreters. And I'll just emphasize that everybody on the call must select a language. So even if you speak English, you must select English behind those three dots. So welcome to the second of our PTAlink webinars of the 2025-26 school year. We are so happy you joined us. And I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving and happy Giving Tuesday. It's quite appropriate that we are doing this grants and funding webinar on Giving Tuesday. So this webinar is really for anyone who, from those who are brand new to grant writing or those who want a quick refresher. Our guests will cover how to search for grants, and we're going to discuss discretionary funding streams through public sources. So please feel free to say hello in the chat. Tell us what school and district you're from, what your role is. We will be recording this webinar. It is currently recording. Participants can keep their cameras off. Please keep yourself muted unless we call on you. And participants can raise their hand or use the chat to comment or ask or answer questions during designated comment periods throughout. So let's get started. My name is Antonia Martinelli, and I am PTAlink's coordinator. I've been a parent leader for quite a long time, starting off as a PTA secretary, then a PTA president. I was on Community Education Council of District 15. I was the president of that council. And so I've been in parent leadership circles for quite a while. This platform, PTAlink, was first started by parent leader Rachel Fine, who was a parent in District 15, who saw that there was a tremendous disparity between PTAs in terms of their knowledge. And she sought to fill that gap through this online platform. And I'm also joined today by my director, Naya Berg. Hi, Naya.
Hi, folks. Nice to see so many people. I will keep this short, but my name is Nia Berg. I'm the executive director of New York Appleseed. We advocate for equitable, inclusive, and integrated schools and communities in New York City and state. New York City gives us plenty to work on. And we acquired PTAlink back in 2023. If you're curious, you are in the right place. This is a PTAlink meeting webinar, but we understood that we want to be able to empower and support our parents and parent leaders in this space, and we could not think of a better way than supporting and uplifting and acquiring the platform PTAlink. Really excited about the work we've been able to do since 2023 and continuing to show up and show out for the parent community, particularly in PAs and PTAs in New York City. And with that, I'll turn it back to Antonia.
Great. And we have some guest speakers tonight. We have Hannah Henderson Charnow from the Office of City Council Member Shahana Hanif. Hannah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Hannah. I'm the Budget and Organizing Director for Councilmember Shahana Hanif, and I'm pleased to join you all today to share a little bit about two pathways for schools to get city council discretionary funding for infrastructure projects at their school. Antonio, do you want me to go for it now, or should we do
No,
it?
no, we're gonna warm up to that. I'm
Okay,
gonna
great.
do intros first. And Donovan Swanson from Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso's office.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Again, I'm happy to be here. Thank you, New York Appleseed, for having me. I'm again representing the Brooklyn Borough President, Antonio Reynoso. I will also share some opportunities to access funding from our office, specifically capital funding, as well as discretionary funding. And, I will say I am only representing Brooklyn. I know that there's a number of PTAs from across the city, super excited. And so some of this information may be applicable, but I also want to just know for our Brooklyn school specifically, I'm your point of contact with our office and look forward to being in community with you all tonight. Thank you.
Wonderful. And our Tracy Kaufman from Candid is here as well.
Hey, hello, everybody. My name is Tracy. I am an educational programming manager with Candid, where basically my full-time job is teaching people how philanthropy works, primarily foundation grants, and helping people figure out how do we acquire grant funding from grant-making foundations, how do we write a good proposal, how do we make the budget, how does corporate giving work, all of those types of things. And yeah, I'm also the parent of a middle schooler who is at MS 51 in Brooklyn, and I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Happy to have you. So this is our website, PTAlink. I hope many of you have visited it. Everything that you need to know about running a PTA can be found on this website. It's completely free. And it is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when your parent coordinator is not there to answer your questions, when your family leadership coordinator is not there. So please take advantage of our website. And we're going to target the topics we just shared a little bit about: participatory budgeting, Reso A, streams of funding through your city council, through your Brooklyn Borough, through all your borough president's offices, sorry, and also grant writing. And I just want to center everybody sort of on what is the purpose, the original sort of core point of PTAs. It could be to build community. It could be to collaborate with your school staff and your community. It can be to fundraise. It can be to provide input on school policies. And it can be to advocate. And grants tick all of those boxes. So I'm going to turn it over to Hannah Henderson Charnow. Hannah, I'm going to allow you to share your screen. I'm going to stop sharing mine. Is that okay?
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Great to chat with you all today. My name's Hannah, as I shared. I'm the budget director for City Council member Shahana Hanif. City Council members have a discretionary budget. So they have approximately $5 million to give to infrastructure projects in their city council districts. So that could be park repairs, library repairs, school repairs. And I will say it sounds like a lot of money, but in New York City, building something is quite expensive. So, for example, I have not seen a playground repair for a park be under $1 million. So just to give you a sense of, the range, school projects are often expensive. One bathroom repair can be $150,000. That's like the typical price that you're quoted on. So these city council members, they have some money to give to schools, to school projects. How does one get that money is the big question, and the question of this webinar. So I want to talk about two processes. One process is participatory budgeting. And maybe can folks in the chat share if they've ever voted in participatory budgeting, if they've ever proposed an idea for participatory budgeting in the past, and if not, that's also okay. Maybe this is the first time you're hearing about it, which is exciting. Amazing. We had some folks do it at their elementary school. So the first step in getting money from the city council is probably to look up your council member and to understand, who they are, figure out who they are. I'm going to share my screen and share a few. Oh, it's not letting me share my screen. No, it's still not letting me.
Antonia, I think she needs to be made a co-host, and unfortunately I can't do that for whatever reason. We got you, Hannah.
Amazing. So the first link I'm going to share, I'm also going to put it in the chat, but you're going to want to find your council member. So if you search find my New York City council member on Google, you will be able to pull up this map and you'll be able to find where you live or where your school is, most importantly, who your city council member is. So for example, I'll put in our office address, which is 197 Bond Street. We get council member Shahana Hanif. You click on this, you come to the city council member's website, and typically city council members have a meet our team or like a staff contacts like section. So you can find the relevant staff member to email to ask if they have participatory budgeting or to uplift a need at your school. So for example, you're going to most likely look for somebody who's the budget director and ask like how your school could apply for funding or how your school could join the participatory budgeting process. For participatory budgeting, there's also a map. So the New York City Council has a map, and participatory budgeting is a really exciting process where community members can propose ideas for funding. Then in the city council districts that participate in this process, those ideas are developed by volunteers in partnership with city agencies. And then the ideas are like which ideas are funded is actually decided by community vote. So everybody who lives in or goes to school or works in a city council district who's over the age of 11, regardless of citizenship status, is eligible to vote on which ideas get funding. So it's really a process where community members get to help decide how government funding is used, and we're sort of broadening our vision of democracy, who's included, who gets to help make decisions. So you can see this is the participatory budgeting map, or this is like the main page. If we go to the map, you can see some of the ideas people have proposed across New York City. Support for affordable, healthy food in Windsor Terrace, purchasing cycles that are for older adults. There's typically many school projects. Let's see if we can find a school project. Although it's important to note that both school projects and other types of like public facilities are allowed, right? So your school project might compete on the ballot against a park project or against, some other kind of project. But there's many different priorities that are represented, and schools have a very good pathway through participatory budgeting to win funding. So here's an example here, PS 45, a calming space. So you should look up if your city council member participates in this process, and then if your school can propose one. I'll show you all. I have to just share my screen slightly differently. Some of the projects that were on our ballot last year, there were quite a few school projects. We put together a zine that showed, the different projects so people could learn about the projects before voting. Brooklyn Collaborative Studies had a lower gym project, up to $750,000 available for that. This is a parks project. The John Jay Educational Campus had a library renovation project for $450,000 on our ballot. We had a bathroom renovation project. And then, because students are able to vote and help support, the get out the vote effort, this is a really great way for schools to, one, cultivate civic engagement in their own school community and, win funding and like empower students, parents and teachers in that process. PS 58 had an auditorium upgrade. So that's just a few examples of participatory budgeting. I would say that what's really critical in participatory budgeting is, a PTA member could propose an idea for the PB ballot on the ideas map and could get in touch with the council member's office and like try to start creating a project. But let's say a project wins. A project is only built in a school by the school construction authority partnering, with the principal or the school administration directly. So you would want to make sure that the PTA and the principal agree on a project that you are promoting that cycle, work together to make sure that it's something the school principal wants, it's something that the school leadership team wants, and that it's not something that a few parents have talked about or have talked about outside of coordinating with school leadership. So I will say that that's very important. A city council member is not likely to put a project forward if once they learn that the school administration is not aware of a project or is not like looped in and is not supportive of a project. So it's a really exciting process, and I definitely recommend that you all look up if your city council member participates in it. And if you have any questions about that specifically, I'll be able to answer that. Let me see. I think that some of the, it's a yearly process. You might still be able to submit your idea and then get in touch with your city council members. Some of the city council members close their ideas collection a little bit earlier and some are a little bit later. We're still early on in the process, so I think it's likely that if you both submit on the map and then reach out to your city council member, you might be able to get in this cycle. However, you might have to wait for next cycle. Typically, the cycles open in October. Ideas collection goes through the end of November, and then idea development is December, January, and vote week is early April. But sometimes they can be a little flexible. And yeah, I see people are noting in the chat that it is optional for council members to participate in participatory budgeting. And that's also something you could raise with your council member and ask why they are not participating, etc. And I'll just put the link to the map in the chat as well. And just a repeat of this cycle, I'm seeing people are asking, every year, the cycle typically begins in October. They close ideas collection kind of the end of November, early December. Ideas are developed from December through January, February, and then they choose the locations for voting or how to do, how they plan their vote week in March. And then in early April, there is vote week. And again, everybody over the age of 11, regardless of citizenship status, who live, go to school, or work in a city council district are eligible to vote. So I also wanted to touch upon Reso funding as well. So participatory budgeting is one pathway to receive what we at the City Council call Reso funding, right? So those infrastructure projects for a school, which are, an auditorium upgrade or a library renovation, schoolyard renovation, that is what we call a Reso project, and Reso is typically a project operated by the school construction authority. Most of the time, city council members will seek recommendations for Reso projects from the school community, once a year. So for example, a budget director might send out a form to all the schools and ask them to, submit ideas for Reso projects. Reso projects, the only sort of requirement is that the minimum project has to cost $50,000. Some Reso projects might be $3 million, might be like a full schoolyard renovation. And I will say that the PTA doesn't have a formal role in requesting Reso projects. Like typically that's something that the school leadership team does with the city council members. But I think that PTAs that are interested in this kind of advocacy can work closely with the school leadership team in supporting them
Somebody
to,
mute themselves, please.
in supporting the school leadership team in requesting Reso funding for their school. So, working together to, bring the council member for a visit and show them the state of the schoolyard and writing letters on behalf of the school and sort of supporting the school leadership team in seeking Reso funding. But it's the same type of money as participatory budgeting. So I think, supporting the school and getting a participatory budgeting project can also be a very powerful way to help support your school in winning Reso funding. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? Do you want to raise your hand and we can, and I see a hand raised. Amanda Eccles? You can unmute yourself.
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. Hi. Thank you, and I appreciate all the guest speakers on the call. Just to clarify, because this is all new to me, but for the participatory funding versus the Reso 8, if I understand, sorry for the noise in the back of my kids. If I understand correctly, with the Reso 8, that's a form or some type of document that goes to the school leadership they can request, but that does not mean as a PTA, we can't, if our council member participates in the participatory funding, we can ask for auditorium renovation if that's one of the requests for the school that continuously doesn't happen. Am I clear?
I think I would only just say that if your council member participates in participatory budgeting and something your school has not been able to get, is auditorium repairs, for example, I think you could propose that idea for participatory budgeting, but you would still want, the school leadership team to be supportive of the PTA, proposing that idea. And I think that, typically within the participatory budgeting cycle, PTAs can be very helpful and supportive because they can, send a volunteer who can help, move the project through the cycle, help develop the project, be a liaison with the city council office, and kind of extend the school's capacity in winning those funds. Additionally, during vote week, the PTA can be helpful in getting the vote out to other parents, to getting votes from the neighborhood, from your family and friends, getting students to vote as well. And that could really help the school leadership team, raise the profile of a project. So that's sort of how a PTA could like fit into the fit into the participatory budgeting process. For Reso A, I think, typically the city council will, reach out to principals and kind of seek to get feedback or recommendations or ideas or, get like a needs assessment from them on what they need. And that's like a form that they would fill out separately and that typically the PTA wouldn't fill out. But again, I imagine the PTA could raise needs to the school leadership team in various opportunities, that might occur during the year and say, it would be great to like repair this, or the PTA is very supportive of repairing this. Maybe you should submit it for Reso A funding. I admit that I have not been on a PTA, so I'm not, sure like what the experience of that is. And maybe that's, kind of a question some other folks can talk about. But I think working closely with the school leadership team and sort of supporting them and, or at least making it clear, like the PTA would like to help to like win a grant or win Reso A funding. Can we reach out to the city council member on your behalf and kind of advocate? That can be helpful to like get attention to a project.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
There's a question, I'm not sure, you probably already answered this. Is the Reso A deadline the same?
So Reso A, the Reso A process, typically the way that works is Reso A projects are essentially confirmed and firmly allocated when the budget of the city of New York is voted on and confirmed. So each city council office is different. Typically, our office will reach out in January to schools to get their like needs. Then sometimes we work with our partners at the Brooklyn Borough President's office to see if, we've seen repeats, for example, like if a school has suggested the same project to both of us, and we kind of try to figure out the best pathway for some of the projects that we're seeing. We can't always fund every project every year. And we kind of make those decisions, I would say, in the springtime. There's not like a hard deadline because everything is kind of dependent on the like final budget vote at the end of the day.
Right. And
but I would just add that PB starts much earlier, right? Like PB ideas are starting to be collected in October and November.
Right. And then, of course, the community education councils have their own deadlines for submitting projects to their city council elected officials. If people want to get that extra voice from their community education councils to advocate for that project, they should also work in collaboration with them to advocate as well. Brendan Spiegel, you can unmute.
Hi, thanks so much. Just wondering if you can point us towards any resources for how school leadership teams can get started in understanding submitting Reso A's or talking to council members. Is just reaching out to our own council member? Are there other things we should be looking at? Or is that more through the principal, more likely that it gets started?
That is a great question. I would say typically for Reso A projects, the school construction authority has, I'm just sort of like looking on their website to see if there's like a simple thing, but they have like a presentation that they have like slides that like explain Reso A.
Hannah, this is gonna go over to mine too. So maybe if we want to hold that question, just because I do have some documents on our own website that might be applicable.
That's great. They have, like you could always invite the school construction authority to come and speak. They're very, they're actually very willing to come and like talk to folks at a school and kind of explain the Reso A process. I think that I'm gonna like maybe when Donovan's talking, I'm gonna look to see at some of their contacts, like any of their public contacts that are relevant. Do you have those
I
listed
have
too?
the Brooklyn ones, but I think we're going to overlap in some of the things I'm going to share as far as Reso A
Yeah.
is concerned.
So I would say that, getting in touch with the school construction authority to get a better understanding of like project scopes and costs, that's like one of the main things that could be helpful. Like maybe I know that I think my sense from working with schools that is just often that the principal and other leaders have so much work to do and are doing so much for the school community. Maybe it could be helpful to like, maybe like gather some documents for them on their behalf, download some slides, bring some information to them. Again, though, some of these government agencies likely will not respond to like cold outreach from, a parent that's unaffiliated with the school, and like a principal would most likely need to reach out to the school construction authority directly to like get them to come to the school, like maybe scope a project or explain to them the resume. But definitely, I think the city council member in your area is a great resource, Brendan. And if you reached out to them directly, if you reached out to the budget director and asked for, like guidance on how to submit a Reso project for city council discretionary funding consideration, they would be able to answer that, especially like in that district specifically.
Thank you so much, Hannah. In the interest of time, I'm going to turn it over to Donovan Swanson.
Yeah, thank you. So, a bit of what I'm going to share is going to replicate what Hannah is sharing. And I think the broader conversation that I want everyone, regardless of borough, regardless of what school you're coming from, is understanding that a lot of the electeds, at least as far as city council and borough presidents are concerned, have some of the same funding sources. It might look slightly different, but this is why you want to get in touch with your electeds. I do just want to also underscore that state electeds, your assembly member and your senator, do have their own processes that are drastically different at the state level. And while they're not, reps might not be here on this call, I would encourage you to also get familiar with your state electeds, because they also have other resources and tools at their disposal as a former Albany staffer. And so my name is Donovan Swanson. I just want to also just round the space of like, I used to also be a community school director out in Brownsville. So I've also worked directly in schools. And so we understand how critical and important PTAs and PAs can be. I'm going to first talk a little bit more about Reso A. And so our process kind of mirrors City Council in that, this is part of the larger budget cycle. However, I will say we do have a hard start in January. Our application typically, I can't guarantee or promise, but our application typically is open January 1st. I haven't, as long as I've been here in this office, I have not seen our application window not be ready in the beginning of January. Our application window, which I don't have, unfortunately, the close date, typically closes mid-February. So it's a short window of time. Similar to what Hannah shared, those applications are usually coming from school. I'm going to even be a little bit more specific, not school leadership. It's usually coming from admin. So either a principal, AP, someone literally within a DOE, with kind of the auspice of DOE. Our application, though, is public. It's not currently listed on our website, but I'm going to share my screen and just show you where essentially it would be posted. And so again, this is for my Brooklyn folks. For the different borough presidents, they have their own process. But you would just go right to our website at Brooklyn BP. Don't worry, I'll be posting the link afterwards. You would go to our departments. It's a little tucked away. I do apologize. You would go to departments, and then you would go to budget. And here you would learn, which we'll talk about discretionary in a second. However, you have our capital funding. And so we actually provide kind of like public schools its own section. Okay, and so when you click here, the plus sign, you have project guidelines, which kind of gives you a quick snapshot of just understanding Reso A. And so Hannah already shared this, but again, minimum threshold of $50,000. Sometimes we have school leaders or PTA folks saying, oh, we need air conditioning, a standalone air conditioner, and it's projected at $25,000. That is not an eligible project for two reasons. One, because it doesn't meet the minimum threshold of 50,000. However, as you'll start to look further along, we cannot fund individual ACs, which is in the nuances. And while I'm going to say all of these things, for all my Brooklyn schools, I want to make sure you are also just reaching out to our office so I can kind of support and navigate you through that process. We can do HVAC, however, which is usually more expensive and for our larger spaces. And so there are just examples, again, of projects or items that are not capital eligible. Okay. Here we also have this fact sheet, which I might share my screen. Hopefully I am. Yes. Okay, good. I already pulled it up for you all, which really kind of gives a more detailed explanation in some bullets. So this sits on our website. Okay. Sometimes information might slightly change fiscal year to fiscal year, but for the majority, it applies. It's the same. We also have our budget director's info. She also can assist. I deal directly with schools, so I'm also a valuable resource. I already talked about the minimum threshold. One thing to note in PTAs, PAs, you might not have this info, but it's good to ask your leaders or in an SLT space.
I'm
Having
so sorry, Donovan, just because I remember, if you see the turtle for anyone on the call, those are our interpreters asking you to slow down. So
yeah, I'm a fast talker. I'm a New Yorker. I do apologize. I will try to slow down.
It's not a random button and someone sending a turtle. So,
yeah, I didn't know what that meant. Yeah.
There you go.
I would not have known. And so capital construction projects, again, are for permanent facilities. And what I mean by that is you want to know if your school is leased or if DOE owns the building. And that is something that a lot of schools don't know, a lot of school leaders don't know, and definitely typically parent coordinators or even PAs or PTAs will not be familiar. So that is something to consider, specifically because we are unable to fund, or SCA sometimes will stop us from moving forward with an award if your lease is set to expire within a 7-year window. These are some of these more complicated things that doesn't sometimes get resolved when you're applying, but I want to give you that information up front. And that would apply across the city. Okay. It's already been shared what some of these eligible projects would be. I want to just echo what Hannah shared. A lot of these projects are more typically on the expensive side. Technology is typically the cheapest and quickest capital investment we can make to schools. Whereas a typical capital project might take 2, 3 to 5 years to get started, unfortunately. Technology usually is awarded to schools within a 2-year window max. So that's just something to consider if you guys are also trying to prioritize your needs. Again, this also echoes non-capital eligible projects. I think the biggest thing, and I already said a little bit about this, but I really want to emphasize air conditioning. We know that there's a number of spaces in our schools that need it. However, we are not allowed to fund individuals ACs. And so that typically comes out of school budgets. Okay, that's a larger fight that we are having on a more grand scheme. I'm pretty sure organizations like New York Appleseed is behind us on that. However, we need to also be fighting for universal air conditioning and coming back to that investment. Our process here, this was brought up, you can reach out to SCA. Again, we would encourage it to be done through your school leader. However, PTAs and PAs can bring this information back to SLT and back to your principals, okay? Sorry, I don't know why this popped up. And so the two contacts we have for Brooklyn, and again, this is specific to Brooklyn, is Jonathan Seltzer and Brian McGinn. What we always encourage is it's great for the principal to reach out. If SCA is unresponsive, you can always then have your superintendent reach out on the school's behalf. And that's kind of the escalation process. We will also reach out if SCA, after multiple attempts, have not responded to you. In the past, SCA would come out to schools. I will be very transparent on this call and say that we have had issues with capacity as of late with school construction authority, where they've even told us, hey, you need to drop 50,000 in a current fiscal year for us to go out and quote an actual project. So I do want to kind of paint a really clear picture for you on kind of, unfortunately, some of the red tape that also binds us in awarding your schools. And yeah, and then there's just a couple of more information here. I also want to just highlight one other thing. If you continue to scroll down, we also have a recording. This is now well, 2 school years ago, but a lot of the information is still applicable. And so for my Brooklyn families, I know there's some questions that I'm going to get to. For our Brooklyn families, you can also pull up our YouTube video where actually SCA presents the deck that Hannah was referring to. And so just skipping it, you'll see some of the pieces. And again, they do present quite often at CECs. And so your community education councils are also a very valuable tool in advocacy. And so I'm not going to kind of repeat this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. The only other thing, and it was brought up, I do want to highlight that for the Brooklyn Borough President's office, again, this does not apply to other borough presidents per se, is that we also work hand in hand with our CECs. And so currently, most CECs as of right now should be doing school visits and school walkthroughs to identify needs. They give that list to SCA. What here at Brooklyn, what we do is we also ask for all the 12 different community education councils in Brooklyn, we ask for their list as well. So that means if a school is on the list and a school has applied, the BP is able to consider it. And now we're saying, well, we have the CEC and we have the school leader also highlighting the need. And as Hannah also shared, we do work with council members. And so I always encourage schools to both apply for your borough president because we do have a lot more capital. I do want to also just note that that also is split with nonprofits. So it's not like all of that money, or not just nonprofits, it goes to other agencies as well, health and hospitals, parks, things of that nature. So it's, even though it's a large pool for the borough, when you think about all the different applications we're considering, it is quite extensive. I want to talk about discretionary very briefly, but I know there might be more questions regarding, so I'm going to first look at the chat and then take any others. So our school got approved for a Reso A request 3 years ago. Can you share how long these projects normally take to begin? Again, it depends on the size and the scope of the project. What I would encourage you to do for Brooklyn specifically is if that award was made through the Brooklyn Borough President, whether that was under Antonio or whether that was under Eric Adams, you can reach out to our office if you have that award letter, or that school leader, have them reach out to us and we can follow up on the school's behalf. I don't want to speak on behalf of City Council, but I will say most of our Brooklyn Council members will reach out also on behalf if it was their office or their predecessor that made that award. Okay, so that was a great question. Is the capital funding that Donovan's discussing the same thing? Yes. Reso A is what most schools know it to be. That is also called capital funding. Do other BPs have similar info on their websites? I cannot speak to other borough presidents' offices, but it is the work of all BPs. And so you should be reaching out to your ed contact. If you've never engaged with your borough president of your respective borough, you should look at their website. But I cannot speak to other BPs. I can only share at Brooklyn, what we have available. As a CC member, D19, how do I push that process forward? Again, for Reso A, you really want to be working hand in hand with school principals. As a CEC member of 19, which is East New York, I'm a product of East New York. CECs, again, have that leverage of your school visits. And so as a CEC member, I hope that you're visiting your schools and elevating any of those SCA requests. And then again, I will be receiving that from your president, Joyce, who also is an appointee of ours, and will be considering it with the application. So the only thing I can say is when you're flagging those schools that have high needs, make sure that that principal is also applying to our Reso A when our application becomes open. All right.
Anna, can you both put your information, your contact info in the chat? I think the questions on this are going to start eating into our next presenter's time, unfortunately.
I'm so sorry. Can I really quickly just talk about discretionary?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so sorry. So the other opportunity, and this is not a pot of money that most PTAs or PAs are able to access. However, if you are and have capacity, this is another opportunity to advocate. So on this same page, We also have discretionary funding, which is different than capital. Usually this is money that goes to nonprofits, so 501c3s. The reason why I want to bring it up in this space is some PTAs and PAs have the ability to become their own 501c3s. If that applies to you as a PTA, you may be eligible for this funding. If you're not a 501c3, which again is a nonprofit, that is okay. This money, which again does not typically go to schools, has been in our office used for certain types of projects. School band uniforms. We've also funded like international trips for certain schools. The way in which we would do that, or the way in which you want to advocate, is that you want to find a local CBO, again, a nonprofit that works in your school building. So let's just take your typical after school provider and work with them to apply on the school's behalf. Again, I will be very quite honest. There's not a lot of school app submissions that we would consider, but there are set circumstances where we may. All I'm going to say is if that's something that interests you or there's specific needs related to discretionary, reach out to me. This is not something that can sustain, for example, after school programming, but like one offshoot things, we may be able to create a win. Again, this is all under the BP's decision making. And with that, I'm going to shut up. Thank you, Antonia.
Thank you so much. We went a little over time. I really appreciate all that information, and I encourage people to reach out to Donovan and Hannah through their email addresses that are in the chat. I'm going to now invite our guest speaker on grant writing, Tracy Kaufman, to going to spotlight you. Take it away, Tracy. And then I'm going to ask Donovan if you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen. Thank you.
You ready? All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Tracy. I am with Candid, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what grant writing is like. Bear with me for one moment while I share my screen. I predict I might get a lot of turtle emojis because I get excited and I talk too fast, and one thing leads to another. Okay, so this portion here is going to be a bit about what happens if, in addition to exploring funding from the city, you also want to explore getting funding from foundations, which is kind of a different ball game than dealing with city funding. And so we're going to go into a little bit about what does a good grant proposal to a grant-making foundation look like. And if you're interested in learning more after this, my organization has a lot of free classes that we do, and those might help you kind of go a little further later on if you feel like you want to. Briefly, Candid, it's where I work. We're a nonprofit organization ourselves. Candid is a nonprofit comprised of two pre-existing nonprofits, which are Foundation Center and GuideStar. Foundation Center, that's the half that I originate from. I've been here 18 years. Foundation Center is the #1 source of data and research on foundations and their grants worldwide. Whereas GuideStar, the other half of Candid, is the #1 source of data on the US nonprofit sector. And almost 7 years ago, we had a merger. We became one organization. We are now known as Candid. We are all about the fact that every year, millions of nonprofits spend trillions of dollars around the world. Our job is to find out, where does all that money come from? Where does all of that money go? And why does it matter? So with that gives you maybe a little context of what all of this information is, where all of this information is coming from. So if we're going to talk a little bit about grant writing to a foundation, maybe we need to back up and see the bigger picture very quickly before we kind of look at the elements of a good grant proposal themselves. So basically, your process when approaching foundations is going to look a little something like this. Before you start really writing and applying for anything, first you have your planning phase. Planning phase, relatively straightforward. Some of this is about just specifically what do you need funding for? Because funders, they don't do vague, they do specific. So getting clear on what are the needs of your school, what do you need money for? But the other part of planning is about time management. Because the thing about foundations is they are about playing the long game. It is slow money. If you need faster money, that is what individual donors are for a bit more. So slow money, what does that really mean? It means not even counting the time that it takes you to write and prepare and submit the grant proposal. After you have applied, on average, you usually have to wait between like 6 and 9 months before you actually receive the money. So if we are December 2025 right now, it's about thinking through not how much money you need to have for your project in a month or a few months. It's about where do you need to be this time next year? What kind of money do you need in hand December 2026? So that is a lot about what planning is all about. But research. Let's quickly talk a little bit about the importance of research. So the number one reason why a foundation chooses not to fund something, it's usually not because they don't like you. It's not because they think what you're doing is not important. Usually they say it's just not a fit with our funding priorities. Because here's the thing. If you're familiar at all with nonprofit organizations, they have mission statements, which are relatively specific about what they do and why, etc. Foundations are a type of nonprofit organization themselves. And so they are often relatively specific about what they care about as well. What are their giving priorities? Some funders say what we care about is, I don't know, fighting poverty, food insecurity, things like that. Some funders say we care about arts and culture, we care about religion, etc. You get the idea. So you want to make sure that you're not barking up the wrong tree. You want to think through who are you approaching and why. So research.
We can hear the interpretation.
Are we good to go? Okay. So you want to think through what is a win-win proposition when doing your research. What do we mean by a win-win proposition between you and your school versus the funder? This is to say that not enough grant applicants necessarily focus on like, why should the funder want to fund this? So thinking through what is the funder most interested in supporting? Why should they care about this project? How does it help them achieve their goals as well as your own? So for instance, if you are looking to fund an early childhood education program, you would want to find funders who have a history of really caring about the importance of early childhood education. If you're trying to start up a music program at your school, maybe if you don't currently have one and you want to start one, you want to find funders who really understand the value of music education and they care about it. You want to basically be able to be partners with a foundation in a way so that you're moving together towards a common goal, if that makes sense. And that sounds trite a lot of times. Like they have all the money. It's not a true partnership, is it? But if you think about it, it is a foundation's job to give out money. Foundations are heavily regulated by the IRS. they're required by law to give out at least 5% of their assets every year in the form of grants. Otherwise, the IRS is coming for them. So they have goals for social change. They have the money to make social change happen. What they do not necessarily have is the on-the-ground expertise to do the work. Your school has the on-the-ground expertise to do the work of whatever change you want to create. What they don't necessarily have is the money. So it is symbiotic. It is supposed to truly be a partnership. So when you're doing research, you want to find who cares about the same things as you, who shares your interests, who shares your goals, who shares your values. How do you do this? We don't have time to go deep into this bit very much, but my organization has a database. Well, part of what we do is we make a database of every grant-making foundation in existence. There's over 300,000 of them. We have a database called the Foundation Directory where you can do this. On the one hand, it is a subscription database, and like a lot of nonprofits, they subscribe to it. But on the other hand, you go to the public library, you can do all the research for free. So I'm putting a link into the chat here. Put in your zip code and you will find where is the nearest location to you. We have at least one location in each borough. I think Staten Island, interestingly, might be the only borough where we currently have like multiple locations at once right now. But for instance, if you're in Brooklyn, you would go to the Central Brooklyn Public Library, go to the social services area. You can do your research completely for free there. If you're in Queens, go to the Queens Library in Jamaica, the central one. You can do all of your research there. Anyway, all of these locations, you can basically easily search what is the subject area of the type you're looking for and your geographic area, and you'll get a list of funders that are potentially for you. So research is going to be a very important piece of all of this. And then the writing, we're getting into that. And then the follow-up is going to be important especially if this is a project that is going to continue from one year to the next, that it's not necessarily a one-off. Ultimately, you want to be able to have a relationship a bit with a foundation. If you want to continue receiving funding from them in the future, you don't want to treat these grants as transactional. You want to treat these as very human to human relationships, because these foundations are actually, they're staffed by human beings. So like, I think Donovan was saying something about like certain projects where they might be a one-off situation that you're getting funding for, you're doing the work is done, the school moves on with its life, etc. But if you have, by contrast, a project that you want to continue from year to year to year, an after-school program, for instance, or an arts program or something, you want to continue to have a positive relationship with that funder after the fact. So you want to keep in touch with them later and have reasons to talk to them even when you're not asking them for money, just checking in or sharing updates or accomplishments related to the project, things like that. And it kind of helps cultivate the relationship better and sets you up for a good situation if you want to apply for funding again next year. Okay. Also, hot tip, always follow the funder's directions. Sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised. A little bit about the question of PTAs being able to apply for grants. So your options when it comes to PTAs being able to apply for grants from foundations. Because the thing is, foundations typically grant to 501c3 nonprofits. And a public school is sort of like, it's not really a 501c3 nonprofit, but within your school, a PTA, like I think was mentioned earlier, a PTA is capable of obtaining 501c3 status, and that would make you fully eligible for applying for any of these foundation grants. And PTAlink can give you more information on what's involved if you want to get nonprofit status for your PTA. You could also just partner with the school. I mean, you should be in close contact with the school administration anyway when you're applying for grants, so you could work straight with them. Or if you're not quite ready to get 501c3 status for your PTA because there is a bit of upkeep involved in that, you could, as an alternative, explore getting a fiscal sponsor for your PTA. Which is basically an existing nonprofit. You enter into a legal agreement with them so that you're, in a sense, kind of borrowing their 501c3 status when you are fundraising so that you're eligible for things like grants and tax-exempt donations, things like that. Any money that you receive is technically like received by your fiscal sponsor, and then they disperse the funding down to you. Usually, it's a nice system. It's always a good option. The only catch with a fiscal sponsor is they will usually take a small percentage of whatever grants or donations you bring in, usually somewhere between like 5 and 10%, something like that. If anyone wants to learn more about fiscal sponsorship, there is a really good like free directory of fiscal sponsors out there. It's quite nice. Okay, but let's maybe take a look at the typical elements of a grant proposal so that we can kind of get a sense of what will a good grant proposal be looking like here. So certain pieces of this can vary, especially because now we live in the era of mostly online grant proposals. But what we really want to zero in on today is the narrative piece here. That's what we're focusing on. The narrative is the heart and soul of the grant proposal. And it tells a story. And I'm being literal with that. It tells a story, a very clear, linear story with a logical progression from before to after, from problem to solution. Basically, you have a narrative that starts with a statement of need, which then flows into a project description to talk about how are we going to meet that need. Then we get some organizational background information, and we finish with a strong conclusion. And we'll look a little closer at these pieces. We're not really going to talk about the budget tonight because we don't have all night. But if you're interested in learning more about budgets for grant proposals, we have a free online class that we do on this all the time. I think the next time that Candid is offering a budget class, a free one, is going to be on December 16th, if I'm remembering correctly. So if you're interested, actually, let me just put one more link into the chat here. I'm going to put this Candid Learning site into the chat because I think it's going to serve you well if you're looking into philanthropy at all. Okay, learning.candid.org. First of all, you want to find places to do research. This Find Us link, that'll help you out. But also go to live training if there's anything you want to deeper dive on. So for instance, here it is, December 16th, project budgets. You need more stuff on budgets, sit in on that class. It's helpful. Okay. But what do funders really want to know about you when they read a grant proposal? What funders want, this is a persuasive document, is all this is. They just want to know, what do you need and why do you need it and why is it important? They want to see you make a compelling case for support. When people haven't dealt with foundation grants before, sometimes they mistakenly think that this is the same thing as a donation. And it's not exactly the same thing as a donation. A grant has a bit more in common with an investment. And if you think of a grant as an investment, you're going to be more successful at getting those grants. So really, like a grant, it's an investment in your school. It's an investment in your community. It is an investment in whatever issue area you happen to be tackling. Whether it's an arts program, a tutoring program, after school programs, etc. And like with any investment, a funder wants to see a high return and a low risk. What does that mean in this sense? So like if we're talking about a business context, a high return on investment would mean, oh, investors, they want to make their money back with interest. And that's not what's happening here. But rather with foundations, what they want to see is a social return on investment. And that means impact, results. Like they gave you $50,000. What happened with the $50,000 and how did it change people's lives in a specific way? The greater the impact on people, that is the greater the return on investment. And then a low risk is a low risk. They just want to know, oh, if we give you $50,000, is something good going to happen or is it going to disappear down a hole, never to be seen again? Funders want to know, can you carry out this project in the most effective and efficient way? And that involves answering the following questions, which we're going to go through one by one in slightly greater detail. They want to know, what specific need are you addressing? What are you trying to achieve? What is your strategy for making this happen? How will you know if you're successful? Why are you the best ones to do this work? And how will the project sustain itself in the long run? So, taking a closer look at these different pieces, these questions all correspond to different elements of grant proposals. First one is, what specific need are you addressing? This corresponds to the needs statement piece of the proposal. And when people haven't done this before and they see the words needs statement, sometimes that gets misinterpreted and people say, yeah, the needs statement. This is where I get to talk about how desperately we need this money. Boy, do we need this money. But you don't really get to say that. There's honestly not really any part of the grant proposal where you get to express desperation in your need of money, unfortunately, because that scares funders. Because they want to think that you're going to succeed no matter what, that whether they give you this grant or not, someone is going to want to give you this grant because you're doing such amazing work. The need statement, rather, refers to what is the need in the community that you are well positioned to fill. You could also, sometimes this is also called a problem statement. What problem are you trying to solve and why should the funder care? And whatever it is, it's not enough to just state that something is a problem. You also need to be able to kind of back it up with some sort of evidence, statistics, a little bit of something. It doesn't have to be tons of evidence, just one or two little data points can go a long way. So for instance, if you're looking for funding to set up a music education program at your school, you could just say, all right, we do not have a music program at the school, therefore we need one. Is that enough? That's actually not enough to say that. You need to go a little further and explain, okay, but why is it important to have a music program in a school? What is the value of music education? You have to be able to connect the dots for them. And there is value to music education, but you can't just trust that they're automatically going to know exactly what it is. You need to be able to, in a case like that, like showcase what is the difference between students who have access to music education and students who do not have access to music education. so that you can say that, oh, the lack of this, it is actually a problem, and here is why. In the needs statement, you're not necessarily talking about your program or project too much yet, if at all. You're mostly setting the stage for it by talking about the world before this project has taken place. A world without music education, or a world without a free after-school program available to the entire school community, things like that. So that by the time you're done illustrating what the need is in the school community for your program, the funder will be saying, oh man, this is a really big problem. We got to do something about this. And the nice thing about the needs statement, it's my favorite part of the grant proposal. If you do a good job with the needs statement, you've really set yourself up for success in everything that comes after. Because this is a good opportunity to establish your credibility by sharing that you understand what your school community needs and what issues they face and the root causes of those issues. You can back up your claims with a statistic or two. But the needs statement is also a good opportunity for storytelling. You want to have this proposal be relatively interesting to read. Like, you don't want a very dry academic looking paper that you're turning in for a funder. The style of writing you might actually want to aim for would be closer to like what you'd find in journalism. If you think of journalism, it is something where it is clear, direct, straightforward language that anyone can understand, whether they are an expert in the subject matter or not. You want to write to be understood. And keep in mind, there are human beings reading this thing, and human beings say that they are swayed by facts and logic, and like to a limited extent, that's true, but they are at least as much swayed by stories and emotions. So you want to pull on that side of it too. Leave a good story for them. As you're writing the whole grant proposal, and in particular, in the needs statement here, this part is the beginning of your story. A story with a logical, linear projection. So you say, here, there's a need for this. We don't have this. What are we going to do about this problem, this lack? Before we go into what comes next, you might want to also just keep in mind who are some of the stakeholders you need to look at if you're trying to determine what are our needs, what is the need in our school, if you're not clear on that yet. And you need to look at some like overlapping sort of stakeholders. There's what do the students need? What do their families need? What does the school administration need? What are the recommendations from educational experts in the field? What are some overlaps between any of these? Like, for instance, after-school programs are the kind of thing that is a fantastic benefit for students and families alike, in that it can give students a lot of great enrichment, social opportunities, all kinds of things. But it's also helpful for families when they have to work and they can't necessarily be there for school pickup at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, speaking from experience. And you need to have a system that keeps students in a safe, happy place until the end of adults' work days. And so that would overlap multiple needs there. But these are just kind of the sorts of things you want to think through as you're kind of exploring your options here. But when you have established what is the problem, what is the thing that our community needs, now what are we going to do about it? This is where the story continues in a logical, linear fashion. So how do you plan to solve the issue that you raised in the needs statement? This is going to be your statement of goals and objectives. So goals are going to be sort of broad, general ideas about what you plan to accomplish, while objectives are going to flow from those broader goals, and those are going to be specific, and measurable. So how much change do you want to create? How many people do you want to impact with this project? In what specific way do you want to impact them? And in what time frame? How much change are you going to make? In what way for how many people in a given set of time? Is it one school year? Is it a semester? Whatever it happens to be. And when you've outlined your goals and objectives, then you kind of move into the action piece of what are your strategies for making it happen? What methods will you use to accomplish your goals and objectives? This is your methodology, your project description. What is the project? So if this were a music program, you'd want to explain exactly how that project is going to work in great detail. If it's an after-school program, if it's a tutoring program, whatever it is, you want to lay it out for them. How will your plan be implemented? Who is going to do the work? What exactly is going to happen? Where is it going to happen? On site at the school? Off site at a different location? When is it going to happen? It's like a timetable with a step-by-step plan of how you're going to complete this work. So if we're thinking of this as a story that goes from beginning to end, before to after, problem to solution, this is the middle. This is everything that happens between the before and the after, which is important, but it's also the hardest part to make interesting and readable, because sometimes this bit, program description, it can read kind of like a laundry list. First we do this, and then we do this, and then we do that. So you might have to maybe vary your sentence lengths, alternate shorter and longer sentences, use a variety of transition words. If the format of the proposal application allows it, bullet points can be nice. If you want to go through here the components of our project with bullet points, that leaves a lot of blank space on a page, which is easy on the eye and easier to read. But also, if you're planning on collaborating with any other groups as part of this work, you'll want to mention that as well. Partly because it would be part of how you get this work done, but also funders love collaboration. Funders really like to see different groups and organizations working together for a greater impact rather than just trying to like duplicate each other's efforts, working in silos. So if you're working alongside other schools, talk about that. Or like when my son was in elementary school, his school was right next door to a theater company. And they would partner with each other and do theater programming where kids once a week would go over next door to the theater and they would either put on shows, they did improv lessons, all kinds of stuff like that. And that was like a really good collaboration and the kind of thing where you could work with a foundation to get support, financial support for that. Also, if you think that this project you're working on could be replicated by someone else, somewhere else in the future, you might want to talk about that too. Because funders really care about two things most of all: credibility and impact. And this is very much about the impact piece here. If a funder thinks that you are trying some really interesting new kind of project where if it's successful, it could be used as a model for other programs done by other schools in other places, that suggests that this funding that they're giving you could have a greater impact, a longer lasting and further reaching impact if other organizations could maybe make use of this work later on. And then it's very important is how do you know if your program is successful? So music program, how do you know if the music program was successful? Were students participating? Did they learn something? Did they have a positive experience? What happened in their lives afterwards? They want to know how were lives changed in some clear, specific way after this work was done. So how will you evaluate the program? Funders care tremendously about this because this is impact. Evaluation helps both the funder and you determine if you have achieved your goals and objectives. So really, this just means you want to take those goals and objectives that you laid out of what you want to accomplish, put them in some kind of measurable terms, and then from there, you can identify key performance indicators based on those objectives. I hate the term key performance indicators. It's jargon, but it comes up, so it's important to know about it sometimes. Key performance indicators, KPIs, these are just what are the specific good things that when they happen, you know you're on the right track. So what are those things that help you know that you are in the process of succeeding? While also kind of understanding that some things are easier to measure than others. And you want to be able to measure things in both quantitative and qualitative ways, like numbers and stories, the head and the heart. Are there numerical ways that you can prove that your program was a success? Are there stories you can tell that can prove that your program was a success? Ideally, you would like to have a bit of both, numbers and stories as well. And I think this makes a lot more sense in an example. So let's say we're dealing with a high school and we set up a mentoring program in a high school aimed at raising the self-esteem of teenage girls. How do you measure that? How would you possibly go about measuring something as nebulous as self-esteem? So, quantitative ways that maybe you could show that your mentoring program was succeeding. You could say, okay, that through the course of the school year, we are now seeing lower rates of detention for the girls in our program, fewer absences from schools, fewer fights, higher grades, higher test scores. Like if you see just one of these things improving, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But if you start seeing multiple of these things improving, that's starting to tell a story, starting to paint a picture. And then qualitative measures of success for this mentoring program to raise the self-esteem, teenage girls. You could get quotes from the girls themselves. You could have them keep a journal as part of like this program and have like quotes that can be pulled from there. You could get quotes from their teachers or from their family members. You could see greater involvement in extracurriculars, things like that. Once again, just one thing improving doesn't necessarily mean anything, but if you start seeing multiple things improving at once, you're starting to tell a story of this project is succeeding. It's actually changing lives. And there's all kinds of ways to do this. Like there's a reason why surveys can be so popular when trying to measure success of things. Like you can have a survey before a program starts, and then a similar survey after a program has finished at the end of the year, and try to measure the difference between beginning of the year, end of the year. And that can show you success. And try to keep on track throughout the year, checking in so that you can see, are we on the right track for things? Are we going to meet our goals this year? Are we getting the results that we said we were going to have this year? And all of that can take you a really long way in just kind of telling a funder a story that's going to excite them, a story about how you are changing lives. You're going from before the program to after the program, and people's lives are improved in some clear, specific, measurable way as a result. I hope that makes sense. Okay, and then there's this bit. Why are you the best organization to do this work? So this often kind of implies a regular nonprofit organization, but I think it will work just fine for a school setting as well. This is where like nonprofits talk about their mission and their organizational history, but you can just tell the story of your school. How long has your school been around? What is your school's story? What makes them unique? What makes them special? What role does your school play in the community, in the neighborhood, in the borough? But just what makes it very special to everyone? You also, when you're talking about the overall organizational background, this bit is where you've backed up from the program or project that you're fundraising for, and you're looking at the big picture. And just thinking through at your school, what other programs have you run that have succeeded? What other services have been provided that have succeeded? What are some accomplishments? What is the reputation of some of the work that you've done at your school? What is your visibility? Ultimately, funders like to see a track record. That's what they want to see. They want to see whoever your school happens to be, that you have done things in the past that are unique, special, and exciting, and that make a difference in students' lives and in the community's lives. So all of this helps them trust you. Ultimately, you want to be able to build a funder's trust if they're going to choose to invest their grant money in you. That's really what we want there. That is part of credibility, building that credibility. And how will the project sustain itself in the long run? If you're looking to fund like a one-off project, this wouldn't be quite as important to focus on. But if you're trying to fund a program that is going to run year after year after year after year, then the funder wants to know, what are you going to do after the grant period ends? Or like, what are you going to do if we can't give you a grant? Or if we could only give you a grant this one year, but never again. They want to know just, what is your long-term plan? Because also, even if a foundation really loves you, nobody's going to fund you forever. Foundations don't generally fund one place forever and ever. And of course, you need more than just grants to survive. So what is your kind of sustainability plan for supporting this program in the future? You'll want to talk about like, hey, are you talking to other funders as well? Have you been getting funding from the city? Are you partnering with any local businesses? Because that's often a really good option for a lot of schools. Are you supporting this through donations from local families? Or maybe you have like kind of a revenue generating plan. You're running fundraising events to raise some money that you can put towards this program in the future. And like, it doesn't have to be a perfect airtight plan for how you're going to fund this thing going forward, but a funder just wants to know that you've been thinking about it at least. Ultimately, they like to see diverse funding streams if possible. They like to see that you have money coming in, support coming in from as many different types of places as realistically possible. Even if that's like in-kind gifts, just lots of volunteers, donated products that you've managed to get, that goes a long way too. So if you have a lot of volunteers, if you have local businesses that have been donating products to you, you might want to talk about that sometimes too. And the conclusion of your grant proposal is often a hard one to write, because at this point you're kind of tired and you feel like you already said everything you needed to say. You've made your case. Here's what we need. Here's why we need it. Here's why it's important. But the conclusion is a good time to bring it back to why you and this project are a good fit for this one funder that you're approaching. Why should this specific funder fund this specific project? Use the conclusion to answer the so what question. If this grant happens, how will life be better for who? And why should this funder care? How will this be mutually beneficial and get both you and the school and the funder closer to their mutual goals? You want to walk the funder to the fit between you and them. That is how you do a good conclusion. And then supporting materials is just, those are all of the other various things that a funder is going to ask you for. They will tell you what all of these are going to be. Like typical things funders ask for, some of which you may not have if you're a school, are things like a 501c3 determination letter from the IRS, budget, audited financial statements. A 990 is often what they ask for from nonprofits. That's the nonprofit tax return. List of board members with any professional affiliations, etc. Basically, in general, you want to send them everything they asked for and nothing that they didn't ask for. However, a lot of times, in particular, if you're a school, you might not have some of the things that they're asking for. So I would say don't just leave things out or just blindly substitute one thing for another without checking in. I would say use this as a relationship cultivation opportunity. Pick up the phone and call a funder on the phone and say, hey, we are not a nonprofit. We are a public school. So we don't have a 501c3 determination letter from the IRS. What could we submit instead that would work? Or board members, like what do you do in these cases? So on the one hand, you will have an answer to your question and they will tell you what you can substitute so that you won't make any mistakes. And at the same time, you will have had a pleasant, friendly conversation with a funder so that later on, when they receive your application, they will think, oh yeah, it's that nice person who called on the phone that time. They were very pleasant. And it just humanizes you and it helps build your case and it helps the relationship as you're pursuing funding. It helps quite a bit. But basically, other than that, you want to make sure you follow directions, keep things legible, easy to read, no typos, no fancy fonts or anything like that. Like, again, this stuff often seems obvious, but you would be very, very surprised. So, just some basic takeaways, and then I guess if you have questions, I'm happy to answer questions. So one thing is you want to maybe start with an outline. So it helps to have kind of a generic boilerplate grant proposal that you have ready so that you can use it for multiple different grant opportunities that might arise. And you're going to want to use that as a jumping off point and tailor and adapt your sort of outline template for different funders and the kinds of interests that they have, the kind of questions that they're asking. But it's going to save you time if you already have some pre-written language that you can pull from and adapt. Keep your language clear and concise. Write to be understood. Write for human beings to actually take pleasure in reading this and be able to like walk away understanding what you're talking about. Nice clarity. No jargon, no buzzwords, no like obscure academic kind of language. No, we aim for clarity here. Focus on the funder's interests in addition to your school's interests and just find that point where the two meet. Follow directions and take some time to revise and edit before submitting. Give it to someone else to read before you submit it. Ideally, someone who has nothing to do with your school, someone completely on the outside. If they can read your grant proposal and understand what you're driving at, then you think that you're pretty much onto something at that point. So that's what I have got for you. What kind of questions do we have here?
Yeah, great. Maybe folks can raise their hand if they have questions. We have about maybe 9 or 10 minutes for questions.
While we're doing this, I might see if I have another link or two that might be helpful for people. If anyone wants to know what does a good grant proposal look like in real life, that same Candid Learning site that I was showing you before also has a collection of sample grant proposals that are free to download. Like I think you'll just have to set up like a free username and password is all, but everything on the Candid Learning site is free. But that sample documents section that I just posted into the chat, you can take a look at real life grant proposals, including like budgets and things like that, and have a sense of what do these things look like in reality.
I'm not seeing any hands raised. But I will just add that Candid offers more of these events, learning events, to learn more about all aspects of grant writing. And are they free, or do you have to pay for them?
The classes that we offer, almost all of them are free. The only thing that is not free is like our 4-week proposal writing boot camp, which is really intensive, but all of our other classes are free. You just go to that Candid Learning site there that I had put into the chat and go to the training section and you'll find tons of stuff.
So you want to do it, Naya?
I was just gonna say there was one question from the chat earlier that asked if you have to go to the library to generate a bank of foundations, or can they utilize your resources from home?
Okay, so the database here, which is the foundation directory, and I can even, I guess, I think I have it open here. I can show you quickly what this looks like since I think we have a few minutes. This is what I was referring to. This is the foundation directory. It's our database of like over 300,000 different funders. So this is a subscription database. It's kind of how Candid keeps the lights on. And so a lot of nonprofits will subscribe to it, but there are numerous public libraries where you can get free access. So if you want to do research in here for free, I think in Manhattan, you would go to like the main New York Public Library in Midtown, and you can do all your research for free. In Brooklyn, the Central Brooklyn Public Library at Grand Army Plaza, you can do it there. In Queens, it's the Central Library in Jamaica. In the Bronx, it's the Bronx Learning Center on I think like Kingsbridge Road. They have access. And Staten Island has 2 locations right now because we just got a new one there. So the NYPL location at St. George, they have free access, but also the Staten Island Foundation also just started providing free public access as well. So I put this link into the chat earlier, but I can put it in one more time. If you want to look for grant opportunities, just maybe click this link, put in your zip code, and you'll be able to see, hey, where is a library where I can do this for free? Okay. If Jersey City happens to be convenient to anyone, apparently all of the branches of the Jersey City Public Library have free access right now. But yeah, it's very simple to use. So let's say, for instance, I kept using like music as an example of what you could try funding. So you could do a search here for, let's say we're doing music and we want to see who cares about music and education at the same time. They fund in New York. And very, very rapidly, we will be able to pull up a list of who are funders who support music education in New York. Of course, my internet slowing down just enough to make this a slower than usual search right now, but you get the general idea of things.
That's great. This is a lot of great information. Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm going to take back the screen sharing. Thank you so much. Let me just, oh boy. I lost my ability to share. Let me spotlight myself. I don't know why I have lost my ability to share my screen. I don't know what is going on. My screen sharing is paused. Oh well. I had wanted to share some information on my screen. I don't know why my screen sharing abilities are paused, but I want to encourage everybody to please join PTAlink's newsletter. And please give us some feedback on this webinar. Naya dropped a link to a form in the chat. We really value your feedback. It helps us ensure that our programming is relevant to all of you. And where is PTAlink going to be next? Well, Tuesday, I am going to be at the neighborhood school in District 1 talking to their advocacy committee. Advocacy committees are part of many PTAs. So I'm going to learn more about advocacy committees. And I also have office hours Thursday morning. This week it's going to be at 11 a.m. We usually do them at 10 a.m., but I will have to do them an hour later this Thursday. So join me at 11 a.m. for office hours. And then our next webinar, we are going to do in early February. We're going to answer all your PTA finance questions with the help of some representatives from Brooklyn Co-op Bank, as well as a tax specialist, Amy Hassler, who has worked with quite a few PTAs. And she was a PTA parent herself. And we will also have the president of the District 25 President's Council, Rachel Baltadano. So we will be talking PTA finances. So please send me your financial questions so that our guest speakers can tailor their presentations to answer them. I'm going to put my email in the chat, info@ptalink.org. Send all of your PTA finance questions there. All information about this event and future events will be shared in our newsletter. We are going to share with you the YouTube link. We post all of our webinars on YouTube and then we download them to our website. So I will send everybody who registered tonight a separate email with links so they can watch this webinar if they wish to. Again, I want to thank our guest speakers so much for all of their knowledge. Thank you, Tracy Kaufman, so much. Thank you, Hannah Henderson Charnow. And of course, thank you, Donovan Swanson from the BP's office. We really appreciate all of your knowledge. I'm sorry I had to rush some of you through some of the content. We could have this conversation, I think, for hours about grants and funding. And thank you to our interpretation team. And of course, thank you to my director, Naya Berg. So yes, join me on Thursday for office hours, 11 a.m. And invite us to come and present at your PTA. We enjoy coming in person as well. So good night, everybody. Thank you so much.